Right, well, if you'd like to follow the story, it's Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41, which is on page 1006 of the Bibles in the chairs. Now, when I hold up this emoji, I want us all to say, "Where is Jesus?" I think we'll have a quick practice. Ready? Where is Jesus? So you need to keep listening and you need to keep looking. Now, I'm not a very good sailor. And I went with my friend Helen, who comes to this church, on a boat to France. And the weather was terrible. It was very windy and there was huge waves. And the boat was tossed around and I felt very scared and very sick. So with my head in a sick bag, I asked Jesus for help. Please let us reach the shore safely. And please don't let me be sick in front of my friend Helen. I'm not a good sailor. I couldn't cope on my own. I needed help. But in our true Bible story, those fishermen were good sailors. They'd been around boats all their lives. They were used to being on the Sea of Galilee, used to the big storms that can suddenly happen there. But this day, they were facing the mother of all storms. A furious squall, it says in verse 37. But the word actually used is more like our word for earthquake. Our English words don't really give us the full picture. It was an earth-shattering storm. And verse 37 goes on. The waves broke over the boat, so it was nearly swamped. And those normally brave fishermen could no longer cope on their own. They needed help. And so, scared to death, they turn to Jesus. Where is Jesus? You can imagine them looking round. He's not bailing out the water. He's not hauling down the sail. Where is Jesus? Well, he's at the back of the boat, sleeping on a cushion. I'd have never have slept on that boat to France, but the scariest of all storms is around them, and Jesus, unafraid, is asleep. I'm not surprised they started yelling, "Wake up! Don't you care if we drown?" I wonder what they expected Jesus to do. Probably help tip out the water, or pull hard on an oar to row for the shore. I'm sure they never expected what happened next. For where is Jesus? He's now stood up, verse 39, speaking to the storm, "Quiet, be still." And everything calmed down. They are utterly amazed because they realize it wasn't coincidence. It wasn't a stroke of luck the storm stopped. Storms stop gradually, bit by bit, as the weather changes. But this stopped, verse 39. It was completely calm. The actual words say mega calm. The fishermen knew it had stopped because Jesus had ordered it to stop. Now, who enjoys building sandcastles? Lots of people of all ages. Great. Now, have you tried to keep the sea from washing it away? Yeah? And could you do that? No? Why not? Why not? Well, we can't control the tide, can we? We can't keep the tide back. But Jesus stopped earth-shattering waves. No wonder the fishermen were amazed, terrified even, and looked at each other and said, "Who is this?" Verse 41, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." You see, God made the world, and only God can control the wind and the sea. In the Old Testament, the bit of the Bible before Jesus, in Psalm 65, it says, "God stilled the roaring of the seas, the roaring of the waves." And in Psalm 107, God stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. When Jesus does the same, he is showing exactly who he is. He is proving that he is God himself, come to earth as a person, come to earth as the Son. So let's say it good and loud this time. Where is Jesus? He's standing right beside them in the wind and the waves, doing what God can do. Now, I've got a little bit more of my talk, but I thought everyone's sitting really well, so if you'd want to have a quick wriggle and a turn round, like that, and then get sat back down comfortable again. Right, here we go. You see, you and I also face storms. Not often the watery kind, like my trip to France, but storms of difficulties and hard times, like feeling lonely, being scared, friends falling out with us, being picked on at school, maybe constantly feeling rubbish about ourselves, or illness that goes on and on, economic hardship, job insecurity, broken relationships, climate change anxiety. And for some of us here, the crisis of leaving our homes and families and coming to live in Britain. These storms are just as real as the wind and the waves, and they batter us just as hard, and we can feel like we're sinking, drowning. Like the men in the boat, we can't cope on our own. We desperately need help. But where is Jesus? In bad times, in our panic and despair, it can sometimes seem like he isn't there, because our life-shattering storms just go on and on. Doesn't he care about us? If he stopped that storm for the fishermen, why doesn't he stop ours? Of course, sometimes our storms do stop. Friends make up with us. The school bully moves away. A very sick person gets better. Our college or job prospects work out. Sometimes that happens, but not always. But what does always happen is that if we ask Jesus for help, then we will find the strength to cope with tough times, to face another day even when life is hard. Because where is Jesus? He's here, right in the middle of our storm, even when we don't realize it. He's right there, speaking into the chaos, taking our fears and giving us courage. For did you hear what he said to the men in the boat? It's there in verse 40. Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Jesus is saying, don't be afraid. Trust me, I'm here with you. That's what the fishermen needed to hear, and that's what we must do. Trust Jesus. Now, I'm not suggesting it's very easy. We may still be scared, worry, feel wobbly, even overwhelmed, hanging on by a thread. But we can have confidence that Jesus is by our side and will never leave us. He will give us strength to see us through. Now, this is not a smile, Jesus loves you kind of trust, not a cozy sentiment. Rather, it's a robust confidence that Jesus is there. We can't see him, and we don't always understand what is happening and why it's happening. But we can know Jesus is with us, and he does care. I read about Nargis, who fled from Afghanistan to a neighboring country when soldiers tried to kill him. And he says this, Jesus is always there. When I pray, I feel that he is sitting next to me and listening to me. Even though I have so many problems, I see his grace and mercy in my life. I haven't lost my hope. Isn't that amazing? In terrible times, Nargis knows that Jesus is there. When my own life became dark and messy, I trusted in Jesus, although I saw no way forward. And Jesus saw me through, even though things never turned out the way I wanted and longed for or understood. You see, we can be sure that Jesus cares and is with us in our storms. We can be certain of this because one Friday, 3 years later, after that storm on the lake, where is Jesus? He's there. He's dying on a cross, willingly facing the biggest storm of all, taking the judgment for sin that should be ours so that we don't have to bear it, taking the storm of death that should be ours so instead we can have life with him forever. Jesus stood in that cosmic storm and stopped it for you and me, so we can be certain he's with us now. The fishermen that day discovered that Jesus is greater than the greatest storm. And we can know today that Jesus is greater than death itself, the biggest of all storms. So when hard times come and we say, where is Jesus? If we trust in him, we will know that Jesus, God himself, is right there beside us, and he's not afraid of anything.